Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's May 14th, and I'm Paul Harrison, along with my colleague Adam Cornish here from Agriculture Advocates.
Hey,
Adam, you
buds.
want to say something?
Good to see everybody.
All right. So we thought we'd touch on a few of the interesting topics in the world of agriculture today. And think, Adam, you want to kick us off? You want to talk about the Farm Bill?
I
There's
mean,
a
we're
few developments there.
we're super excited, right? The Farm Bill is actually going through. It's been a minute, although this is a skinny bill, as many people know, because many of the provisions that often get bundled into a Farm Bill actually passed through last year in the one big beautiful bill. But some of the things that have come through is the SNAP benefit adjustments. Um, there's potential real significant reductions in future benefits. And there's also the idea that they could be outsourcing SNAP certifications and other core administrative pieces to private entities. So that's kind of a scary idea if not implemented properly. And then there's the idea that there's actually work requirements for achieving your SNAP benefits. So there's some concerns there. There are happier pieces. The Maha folks have gotten some wins in terms of getting fresh produce integrated into more of the SNAP and WIC benefits. We'll have to see what happens with the Senate. The Senate is likely to moderate a little bit. I would say the one other
Yeah.
thing that's bothering me is the it relates to glyphosate. This is another win for Maha, which basically says that states are able to provide the labeling requirements for products, taking that authority away from EPA.
Which is kind of the opposite of what what Bear and others would like to see, right? In terms of being able to apply federal regulation or labeling requirements, right? Um, so, okay, with the fresh fruits and vegetables getting in and all, aren't they also taking soda out and things like that, removing some of the processed foods, highly processed foods?
I didn't see much. I haven't read the bill to that level of depth, but that's a possibility. I know that's at least what Maha would be hoping for.
Yeah, I
So
thought they were pushing on that certainly. And I gotta say, I think I lost my Kalshi bet there because I didn't think Farm Bill was gonna make any progress. So we might have to fight over definitions though of whether a skinny bill counts or not. Okay, well
Well, we've
that's
known
all
for a
pretty
while it would be a skinny bill. I will just say a couple of other small things, and we'll talk more about this later. But it's there's a piece that requires that purchases from the Food for Peace program requires that at least 50% of food aid to be sourced directly from the U.S. and shipped on U.S. vessels. So that's going to create more constraints in actually providing food aid through the Food for Peace program.
Yeah, I mean that Jones Act requirement kind of right, the US shipping between US ports, what they suspended, similar there with the Food for Peace, that's always been a impediment in terms of efficiency, right? I mean, I
Hmm.
totally get using U.S. ships and totally think that's great, but it's always been a real challenge that they faced in moving large cargoes and stuff. Not just well, I mean, it's been a problem, right, cost wise, but it's also a problem because there just aren't that many U.S. ships,
Hmm.
right, these days.
And
Um,
it's the margins for those shipping companies are getting tighter with the increased price for fuel.
yeah, yeah, well, yeah,
Talking
the
and then
fuel
talking
issues.
about fuel, the year-round E15 component of the Farm Bill was actually removed, partially to let them actually get this through and get the skinny, thick, however you want to talk about your farm bills passed. But surprise, surprise, they pulled E15 out and they were able to get that legislation passed as well. Thoughts
Yeah,
on
I
that,
like that.
Paul?
Yeah, no, I saw the development passed in the House on Wednesday and a bipartisan vote, 218 to 203.
Hmm.
Pretty strong. I think they had 122 Republicans, 95 Democrats, right? The Midwestern caucus was really working hard there. If you look at the state vote totals, Illinois is just all yes. Iowa's
Hmm.
all yes, right?
Yeah.
Missouri's mostly yes, a couple of no's. I don't know who those,
Hmm.
exactly folks are. You look at like Texas and California, and they're more like 50-50 kind of splits, right?
Hmm.
And some of the other states, I was playing around with looking at vote totals here earlier, so it's just kind of interesting. But nice to see the bipartisan split there. Now it's going to head to the Senate. Of course, the oil lobby is very, very strong there. What I don't quite understand, so national corn growers, corn producer folks, very excited about this E15 because it should increase market demand in the United States. And this is a time when we're exporting a lot of ethanol already, right? So we're doing really well there. But give us, greater domestic demand, which would be good. In theory, should put more money into farmers' pockets. Saw the sorghum associations were supportive of this because they see the benefit of it as well, right? Soybean folks, I was a little perplexed as to why they kind of were for and against, but not immediately like on board completely. Um, because a corn producer today is a soybean producer tomorrow, right? Because you're always flipping because of the nitrogen, right? And and all, and so and obviously, I mean, you soybeans you can use for like maritime diesel and stuff like that, and biodiesel, um, which is also important and things we should be pushing forwards too. But I I see the oil industry folks who are opposed to it. Not all oil folks are opposed to it, right? But the ones who are really quite unified, right? And pushing hard, and they're going to push hard in the Senate to fight against this, right? But all the ag producers, all the crop producers ought to all be aligned because it should be beneficial for everybody, right? Increasing demand. It's good for consumers, and I mean, the current administration is obviously a fossil fuels administration, right? But you can see the Iran war is pushing everybody towards renewables or alternative fuels, right? Because now the reliance on oil is really shown its weakness globally, right?
Hmm.
So people everywhere are pushing for alternatives, and whatever administration comes next is much more likely to be alternative fuel friendly, right? So I think that this is a good opportunity. I'm glad to see this happen for farmers because I want to see them get more money in their pockets, right? Um, but I think we need more unanimity amongst the producers, and I get it, right? It's super complex, right? It's so complex,
Can I step in,
right? There's
Paul?
all blendings and everything, right? But I
Paul,
just think it's one of those where
can I give
something more,
some color very quickly?
please.
It's the small oil refineries. And as you said, this is really a complex issue where EPA is setting particular standards for the
Yep.
amount of biofuel that needs to be generated each year, and that's divided up into many different categories. Um, and so this is a win for corn because that's what E15 is for. The ethanol that is produced comes directly from corn. It does not come directly from soybeans, which are typically used for biodiesel. And
Right.
there's a provision in here that used to allow small refineries to basically say, we're not going to, they're exempt. They don't need to make uh, soybean based biodiesel or do the blending, and then that gets passed upward onto the bigger companies that kind of can absorb any of the losses. That's been eliminated. Those exemptions will not exist, and this is going to both hurt the. It's not going to hurt the refineries because then they don't have to. Um, they still get the exemptions, but the soybeans don't get used or the soybean oil, and so this is having a direct impact on our soybean producers because suddenly they don't have a place to put those soybeans anymore, or at least the soybean oil. So that's where the problem is, and that's where a lot of the constraints actually come in. Is the small refineries are saying that if they have certain obligations that they must meet, they'll go bankrupt, and so the bills, both as the farm bill and now as the separate one, have been trying to straddle that line and make things easier for the small refineries while also not angering some of the bigger boys. And so that's where a lot of this is where the conflicts are arising, and it kind of feels like no matter what the end result is, someone's going to be left unhappy. And so if we want soybean to be happy, then there needs to be a requirement for that same amount of soybean oil biodiesel blend to be taking place, but being put into the hands of the bigger producers, and they don't want that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it all gets worked out. anyway, now as it heads to the Senate, and we'll see how the oil lobby and the oil state senators
Yeah.
respond there. But hopefully, it's some progress, right? Because it should, I feel like consumers should have the choice to use E15 if they want to. It should lower fuel prices, right? It should give farmers an opportunity to put more money in their pocket, and we should be enabling the corn producers, soybean producers, sorghum, all those folks to take advantage of this, and we should have more, fuel options out there
Hmm.
because we need it. Not It's not just climate; it's cost, right? It's efficiency, right?
Yeah.
It's things we can do to help ourselves. So
I mean, and honestly, it's a little bit smarter than just temporarily eliminating gasoline taxes, as if that like
yes,
that 15 cents will just suddenly make everything magically better.
well, it's
Meanwhile,
18
all
cents, 18 cents
oh,
a gallon on gas,
regardless, and then
but it doesn't.
suddenly we're not getting that money for the roads anymore. But anyway, talking
Yeah,
about choices that are being made, I hear that President Trump has gone to China.
he has. He is in
Yeah.
China. Seems to be going well. Took along a large business delegation there. I'm sure, and the focus is on trade, right? I mean, there's been a lot of disruption in the trade with China over the past year from the tariffs that he implemented and a lot of the restrictions in trade that have been put on. So he's looking to alleviate a lot of that, try to remedy that. And you can see over the past year, China has diversified. They were shipping a lot of stuff to the United States, but once we closed off the markets with tariffs, they started shipping a lot more stuff to Africa, Europe, and other places, right?
Hmm.
So you can see like electric vehicles from China making inroads all over the place, except here. And so, China's adapted fairly well. On the flip side, I think we've lost what $25 billion or more in exports to China. They're not buying our stuff like they were. So we'd like to change that. We'd like to get them to buy more stuff. So I expect, there'll be some trade announcements. I think, it's always in the details with the Chinese, right? It's not what we say about what the Chinese said. It's what the Chinese say about what they agreed to. So I have to look and see what they actually, um, confirm and then what they actually do.
Do we
Um,
have any do we have leverage? What leverage can the president actually exert in this space? Because, yes, he's on the ground, but that doesn't mean he's actually going to uh, get what he
yeah,
wants out of it.
I don't think we I mean, just a basic assessment, the leverage that we have, obviously, we thought we had a lot of leverage with market access, and China's adapted to that by opening markets in new places. They do need the U.S. market, right? They want that, and all they've got to export because that's what their economy is, and they've not been able to create a consumer economy yet. Um, so it doesn't consume all of their production, but they aren't going to change a lot of their approaches, right? They're going to continue to be the world's producer and manufacturer. That's what they want.
Hmm.
They're going to continue to look for the U.S. and other places to buy their product and provide raw materials, um, but they're going to push towards independence for themselves, right? They don't want to be relying on us for aircraft, even though they may sign a deal for 500 Boeing aircraft here, right? But
Hmm.
long run, they want to produce their own. Um, you see with chips, right? Like Nvidia CEO is part of the trade delegation there. They want to produce their own chips in the long run. They'll use some of ours, but they want to produce their own. And it's really in our interest to have them using ours because we're better off when the world economy is running off like the US dollar, US chips, all that kind of stuff. Um, so no, I don't think there's a lot of leverage that we have here.
Hmm.
Um, we'll see how this all turns out. I'm sure there'll be a lot of positive announcements. The truth will be in the details and the implementation afterwards as to what the Chinese actually do. Um, I guess one kind of commentary on this. I am not a big fan of this summit because the emphasis on trade, which is important, um, and the delegation and everything, and I think most of the headlines are going to be about trade deals, makes us look more like a European state um,
Hmm.
and the United States, right?
Hmm.
Usually, U.S. leaders go and meet with you know Chinese or Russian or the European, head of state, and it's a strategic outcome, right? We've got nuclear weapons issue to discuss with China. There should be some arms control issues. I don't think that's getting touched on. Taiwan's obviously a huge one, and there's no good solution there, right? But that's a critical one, right? There's a whole lot of other things going on there, and you see President Xi brought up, the idea of managing China's rise to be a peer with the United States as a world power. So although China's a 5,000-year-old empire essentially, so maybe we're still on the rise and maybe they are the established power. I'd flip that around if I were the president and throw that back at Xi as talking about the our rise still, because I think we should are still in the upswing. We're not in the decline. Um, but all of these things, it's hard to know how this is all going to come out, and I don't think we're in as strong a place as we need to be. And I just am concerned that, when we focus on the trade deals and not on the big strategic picture, we don't come out stronger in the end.
Well, and that's kind of a defining feature of this administration, where it's about the immediate gains, it's about what we're trying to respond to in the moment, rather than what are our long-term strategies and plans. Especially since the president came in and said the last 4 years didn't happen. I'm just going to erase it all and start fresh. And it to me it is a sign of weakness to come in and he has to be the one to take care of a trade negotiation. That's not the president's job. I mean, that can be a piece of it in the background, but to me this signals more than anything else weakness. Um,
Yeah, it's concerning, right? Because usually it's, that's something the president of France does, right? Does trade deals in the Gulf, right? You see
mhm.
that all the time, right? Gets people to buy Airbus airplanes and stuff, right? Okay, do you want to be compared to Macron, right? It's not,
I do
about
because he the man's
anyone
a
like
handsome
you
man.
do, right? But if I'm president of the United States, I'm I'm up here, right?
Yeah,
And so that's not exactly how I wanna be seen, right?
yeah,
Although I get it, right? He's a business guy, and he does trade deals. 500 aircraft or so, which is what they're talking about, right? That's a huge deal, right? These are huge numbers, but then you're always putting yourself on the line, right? If the commerce secretary goes out and negotiates a deal and then economic conditions change and the deal doesn't happen, okay, that's on the commerce secretary, right? He's got to deal. When you're the president, that's your name on the line, right? So why put yourself in that position if, demand for if they agree to buy 500 planes and then global air traffic demand drops off a cliff next year and the Chinese say, actually, we don't need those 500 planes. Better the
but
commerce secretary is on the hook than the president, right?
Yeah, but let's also note absolutely nothing sticks to this president. So, in a
Sure.
different administration, sure, I would see that as being an issue. Here, he can claim that it was a win, and then if someone comes
Yeah.
along later, it's not his fault. But let's move on to I believe there's some happier news in this realm, such as
Oh yeah.
there's an announcement of a beef processing center in China. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I saw the Chinese have agreed to I guess recertify U.S. beef processing facilities, and they certify individual facilities to export to China beef,
Hmm.
pork, chicken, whatever. I think that's a very positive development for the U.S. Beef industry, right? It's not that we have like extra filet mignon to export at the moment, but
Hmm.
the Chinese take those parts of the cow that are parts of the carcass there that we don't want to consume in the United States, right? And so this is something we talked about a lot in regards to chicken, in regards to pork, in regards to cattle, right? They take the offal, they take the elements that normally have no demand in the United States except maybe for pet food, right? At
Hmm.
pennies on the pound, and they pay dollars a pound for it. So
Yep.
this is a really good deal. This is an example of a win-win for both, right? The Chinese, I always love the example of chicken feet, right? They always want U.S. chicken feet because they're so plump and juicy, and chicken feet are a delicacy in China. Okay,
Yep.
great, fantastic, right? Similar here with the cattle, right? So they want this stuff that are elements of the cow that otherwise would go to landfill or go to pet food, and so it adds a lot of value. And so this is very beneficial to U.S. Processors. So I think that's a great development, right? Very
Hmm.
positive and all. It does raise the issue, which I've had a problem with, of the Chinese leverage point of certifying individual facilities for export,
Yeah.
right? and that gives them leverage because, if there are 5 facilities in Nebraska and they want to put pressure on the administration by withdrawing permission for those facilities in Nebraska, then they do it, right? And we've seen them do it,
Hmm.
right? And it's an ability that we gave them in previous trade negotiations and something we never should have given them, right? The USDA stamp of approval should be sufficient, and it shouldn't matter which facility something comes from, right?
Exactly.
That's just a layer of knowledge that they then exploit for leverage. So,
Yeah. Anyway, so what you're saying, if I can recapitulate, is essentially if they tried to shut down exports from a particular facility, we say, well, then you're not getting any at all, and play tough.
well,
But
I mean, yes,
because of previous deals, that's not a place that we theoretically have leverage. Although, again, with this president, he does whatever he wants, so we could have that kind of tough negotiating position. Correct?
yeah, you could change that, right? Well, and what it is, say, I mean, and we've seen this, right? Say China's unhappy with a US decision, they want to put pressure on political supporters of the president. And so they will look which counties, most supported the
Mm,
president. Oh, there's a facility in that county. Okay, it's now not able to export, right? So that's how you put pressure on them from the Chinese perspective, right? And so that shouldn't be happening. It should just be if something is certified for export by the US Department of Agriculture, then it's good enough. And then you eliminate that leverage point, right? Because China can't then target a specific facility, right? It's not that we say, oh, you're not going to get anything if you don't take, this stuff. It's been certified by USDA. That's our national authority. That's all that is required, right?
yeah.
You don't need an individual facility inspection. So
It reflects the lack of long-term strategy and planning, and kind of throwing our regulators and our top-notch gold standard science under the bus. But while we're
yeah,
talking about beef, could we talk about some? I know you had a conversation with someone in
oh,
South Carolina this week.
yeah, so I grew up on a hobby farm in Southern Illinois, but then I also grew up in South Carolina. So I was back in South Carolina dealing with some family stuff over the weekend, or this past week, and talked to this old boy, and which is how we talk about each other back in South Carolina, and who raises cattle. Just raises beef cattle, has for years, right? And it's always it's not a high profit business, right? Um, but with this change in the or elimination of the tariff rate quotas, right, for beef imports, that's a difficult pill to swallow, right? Because the folks who are raising the cows or raising the cattle um, are really suffering already, right? The margins are low because the processors are buying them from them, but they're just not making a ton of money on this. So now the processors have an opportunity, at least from his perspective, they have an opportunity to buy from other sources. So now that they got multiple sources, they can keep the prices lower. But that's not going to necessarily help the consumer, right? Because the processor is going to maintain a profit margin. So
Hmm.
he didn't see any win on this for consumers, and he certainly saw how this was a threat to his ability to stay in business. So I mean, it's one of those things where um, I certainly get the motivation behind it by the administration, right? Oh, okay, let's bring in more beef, and certainly they bring in beef, they blend it. Most of it goes to hamburger anyway, but that's a big market in the United States. So how do we help out the consumers without undermining the producers? And then, like he was saying, processors are going to be the actual winners here in all of this, not the consumers, not the producers.
Well,
So,
especially since they're not going to be, with the elimination of the TRQs, um, distributors aren't required to lower their rates for consumers at all. So, what was the,
right.
is is the intended effect actually going to take place? Is a good question. And then, whether or not it is, how do we provide relief to our beef farmers? I don't know if we have an actual answer to that. Um,
Yeah, I don't know that you do, right? I mean, because beef producers got to be encouraged to, increase the herd to help consumers long term. But to do that, then
yeah,
that's going to lower their prices in the future. So you get more for the cow now, you do in the future. It's
Well,
just it's
and our
a
cattle herds
crazy.
are actually at the lowest that they've been since the 1950s.
Yeah.
Um, and this would seem to be yet another nail in the coffin for our beef industry. Rather than providing incentives to let them expand their herds and uh, really dominate the market, this is just weakening them further. Add on top of that, New World screwworm and other pressures, and I don't know.
I'll bring up my favorite topic.
What's that?
That's my favorite zoonotic disease.
Yeah, we don't have anything to really expand on that today. But I mean, just
Maybe next
this is causing our cattle folks are getting stretched even further.
time. Yeah.
Um, we have an entire topic that we could discuss about this agri trade. You know, I'm gonna just jump into it. This agri trade suit from the federal government was actually started
Oh yeah.
under Biden, but basically the DOJ is claiming that agri-stats has been causing inflated beef prices, and that it's actually their fault. It's basically saying that because they've been collecting so much important data and providing it to everyone, it's actually causing um, inflation of the prices by restricting supply. I don't really understand those connections. Do you?
Essentially collusion.
Okay.
Um, I think, yeah, sorry, I've looked at that a while ago and haven't looked at it in the past week or so. Um, but yeah, I mean, they're going after these folks. I don't. I have trouble believing that the aggregation of data is the driver. It's the utilization of that data
Hmm.
by processors, right? That perhaps is the contributory factor there, right? It's just a tool that they're using. But in and of itself, I don't know that that's
Hmm. One,
the folks who are responsible.
it relates to
Certainly, somebody's responsible.
diversification, right? It's about diversification. If we
Yeah.
provide more incentives for especially U.S. companies to enter the market, become competitors with each other, and not just be immediately glommed up by some of the bigger producers, then you have that competitive market, and that can actually reduce prices overall. Now, the White House has pointed out that 85% of our beef market is actually owned by the Brazil company JBS, National Beef,
Mhm.
and then the American-owned Cargill and Tyson. So again, this comes to a virtual monopoly where they can manipulate the market themselves by collusion and coordinating with one another. Um,
Yeah.
does the U.S. actually have anything that we can do to slap them on the wrist? And should we?
Um, I think they probably do need diversification amongst producers, right? I mean, when I
Mm,
lived on a hobby farm in Southern Illinois, right, we um, we had cows and milk cows. Every now and then we'd have a steer, right, and we would take that over to the butcher, the local butcher, and have it processed and bring it back and put it in the freezer, right? But you're hard pressed now to find a local butcher
no.
down there. Maybe there's a guy who processes deer during deer season, but that's about it, right? Um, but it's not like it was. And it's that way across the country, right? Because it's hard for them to compete with the larger processors. Um, so yeah, and I mean, I'm not waxing nostalgic for the old days, right? But need some diversity and some options, right? And too many times there's just not enough options.
Hmm.
So you got to have that options in the market to keep competition going.
And I'm seeing that the administration is noting these problems. They're seeing these virtual monopolies and having at least stern words for the producer or for these industry giants, but not actually doing a whole lot. Like they're attacking agri-trade for collecting information. What are they actually doing for these larger companies that will incentivize them to change their behavior? And what are they doing to actually get companies on board, smaller companies, to be able to enter the market and actually have a place there? And I'm not seeing much activity in that space.
Yeah, it's similar to like fertilizer, right? I mean, there's just a few producers, but if you had more competition, maybe that would be helpful in lowering prices, right?
Yeah.
So,
So let's move on. We always want to give up quick updates on the Iran war. There's a whole lot of developments, right, Paul? We've made some real advancements in the last few weeks. Yeah.
I don't think so. But no, I mean it's situation normal, right? It's what once was open, it remains closed. I see the Chinese are trying to push a super tanker through today. So we'll see how that goes with the president in China. The Navy may hold off on intercepting that one. They may wait till after he leaves China. But no, I
What is
mean the
what does the
situation is
super tanker carry?
uh, uh, oil, right? It's a
Okay,
super tanker, so it's pouring
makes
oil,
sense.
right?
Okay,
2 million barrels of oil is what a super tanker carries, right? Generally.
okay.
So, a couple million barrels of oil, that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
There have been a few. I saw there was a liquefied natural gas transport that got through the other day.
Hmm.
Um, but it was going to Pakistan, right?
Goodness,
So,
what?
and Pakistanis have been super helpful in facilitating the discussions. So you got to think that they're not going to have as many. If a ship is headed to Pakistan, it probably gets through both the Iranian side of the blockade and the U.S. side of the blockade because Pakistan is incredibly dependent on fuel imports from the Gulf to maintain social cohesion and stability, right? Um, so we're not going to stick it to them.
I know this is a weird question to bring up or a thought, but can you just imagine what it's like to be on one of those ships as they're going through, thinking, what if we're the first ones to be attacked?
Today, right? Because plenty of them have been attacked. Um, yeah, no, I mean, you saw like the Thai guys who were on the ship that got hit where they took out the rudder and actually killed
Oh,
a
I wasn't
few
aware.
people. This was a month ago or more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this was abandoned ship, and all.
Jesus.
Um, no, I mean, when I was in Guyana years ago, right, we had a lot of folks or a lot of guys who worked the boats around the world, right? And it is lonely and boring,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't imagine how it is with all the folks stuck in the Gulf, right? Because they're stuck on a ship, and you can only scrub it and paint it so many times, right,
Okay.
before you start to go stir crazy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Hmm. So
So
we're still having limited passage
limited
of
transits.
especially of our petroleum resources that we need, as well as fertilizer and natural gas. So those are all having direct impacts on our farmers. Um,
Yep.
what are the tariffs doing right now?
As far as the tariffs go, the tariffs remain in place, at least the most recent ones
Mm-hmm.
that were implemented after the Supreme Court struck down the previous round. And as Ambassador Greer says, they are working on the 301 investigations, hopefully done by July, which will allow them to implement, I think it was a 10% tariff on folks. So they'll be kind of replacing the general tariff with these more specific and justified ones, which Section 301 once they do the investigations and make the determinations, should stand up in court pretty well. So I think those will be in place for a while.
Yes, the word justified means a lot of things. I think in this case, you mean are backed up by a legal basis, even if the 301s in a different administration would not have gone through in the first place. So this is really just a way to have a system for tariffs that are less likely to be struck down by the court system. So
Yeah,
but
they're going to do the work.
we'll still be having they're still retaliatory tariffs and causing, they're going to skew the market in ways that are harming our farmers at the end of the day. I will note that you talked about the Jones Act earlier. The administration has suspended the Jones Act
Mhm.
related to fertilizers. So that will hopefully will increase fertilizer supply and may reduce costs to some extent.
Yep.
Um, I do have a quote from Marco Rubio, if I may. Um, it's the fertilizer that they need for their food and crops that's stranded in the Persian Gulf, not our fertilizer, their fertilizer. So we
Who's
want to be
they?
helpful, and that's why the president stepped forward because we're the only ones that can, frankly. It's basically talking about stranded cargo ships that may contain fertilizer and crops, and he's claiming that that these ships are bound for destinations other than the U.S. And so this is about his claim is that it's helping others. I I doubt that this administration cares much about how easily other countries are getting fertilizer or their crops.
Well, I mean, Colin Powell
Mm,
noted that if you break it, you bought it, right? Same as
mm,
going in the dime store or whatever, right? So, the Gulf was the straits were open and the fertilizer was flowing. Um, After launching an attack, the Iranians did exactly what, you know, every discussion about potential conflict with Iran had theorized that they would do. And now we're all suffering from higher fertilizer prices, higher diesel prices, higher bunker fuel prices, and shortages, right? Because trade has been impeded from a region that we really rely on. And so there's no easy solution, and we don't have one. We've got an Iranian regime that is more radical and more dug in than the previous one, and no indication from what I've seen that they are unable to control the population of Iran at the moment. We'll see if that changes, but that could be a really long wait for the Iranian people to rise up again.
hmm
So I don't see the situation changing. Maybe the Chinese agree to bring some leverage. I saw the president said that China's agreed to help with the straits. I'd like to see from the Chinese what they meant when they said they'd help, if they said they'd help.
Yeah.
Um, and so would like to, better understand that before I, can assess what might change. But yeah, there's no quick solution to make the fertilizer or the oil flow. So
Yeah. And well, we'll continue talking about that and being full of ambiguity while giving some fun conjecture for the future.
yep,
Signing out for today, we have Adam Cornish,
Paul Harrison.
and
Good talking to you.
we've been your agriculture advocates.
Always.